A Ten Commandments monument at the Oklahoma State Capitol must go.
Salutations, you guys, and thank you for tuning in to another segment, or at least another series, that I've entitled The Occult World. And unlike the Crisis Corners, where we look at things in a political fashion, with this particular style of videos, I plan to look at the occult world that we're involved in, the spiritual warfare that we are actively engaged in. Normally I look at things such as the United Nations, the New World Order, global treaties, transhumanism, and a number of things, politics essentially. But with this particular video segment or style of videos, I want to actually look at the esoteric, the occult, the spiritual, the multidimensional fashion, the framework of the world that we're engaged in. Because I feel like while we're moving more and more towards this technological takeover, we're losing sense of what the source is. And I'm not going to go down that path with you guys, but what I'm trying to get at is that we need to start looking at things with a spiritual eye. Everything doesn't only happen here in the physical realm. That's silly. We need to start looking at things differently. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. Before you, I have two articles. They recently came out. Actually, they came out on the same day, April 6th, just the other day. And in response to some of the demonic activity that's going on in the world, and whether or not people would like to admit it, we are actually engaging with demons on a regular basis. Daemons, spirits, higher selves, whatever you would like to call them, we are multidimensional creatures. So whenever these articles popped up to me, and this is only my analysis or my thoughts on the process, whenever both of these articles came up, one signifying the fact that more temples to Baal were going to be established, that they were going to be erected in Syria and Times Square, you see. And another one saying how there are Roman Catholic exorcisms classes being offered to people. Now, if you know anything about the Roman Catholics, or at least the modern day Roman Catholics, people like the Franken Pope Francis, and I'll go over him in this video as well, and his ties to the occult kingdom. Whenever you look at these things and you understand who the Roman Catholic people are, then you really do understand that child sacrifice is pretty much in their culture. Pedophilia is a very real thing. This is why the LGBT is pushing so hard for pedophiles to actually have a preferred sexual orientation. Because when you do this, what you're essentially doing is you're traumatizing, you're diminishing, destroying, or even just thrashing the image of God. And I'm not going to preach to you guys, but I really want us to look at all the things that this encompasses, okay? There's no coincidence that the same day that they're talking about more temples to Baal, and then like I said, in the same day, they're also talking about how they're offering classes. You see, could it be that they're actually expecting a rise of demonic activity? Could it be that they're actually seeing the rise in demonic activity? What does this mean whenever we actually have, in modern times, people trying to essentially resurrect spirits or resurrect old beliefs, okay? So our modern gods right now are Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Netflix, the internet essentially. If they resurrect this new god, the temple of Baal, you see, what they'll essentially be doing is bringing forth an old spirit into a modern day society. This is techno-sorcery. This is alchemy, okay? So how do these things tie together? We need to look at what's really being presented, what this means on a global scale, the fact that demonic influence is on the rise. And this is why I love talking to you guys, because some of you guys are able to say certain things in certain ways, and it just clicks in me, and it just makes perfect sense. I was talking to somebody the other day about MK Ultra, and they said M culture or MM culture, and the way I had interpreted it is it's the CIA's media culture. Media culture, you see. And how does this tie into demonic influence being on the rise? Well, who's doing all the child trafficking? Who's doing all the drug smuggling? Who's doing all the snuff films? Who knows about what's going on in this country and has a hand in it? The CIA. Who started the CIA? George Bush Sr. What did he? He's a known occultist. He's a known Satanist. Him and his son George Bush Jr. You want to hear something even more strange? Let's go back, okay? I have a picture for you because I'll get back to this, to media culture, to CIA, MK Ultra in a second. But you want to hear something strange about just the understanding of this, right? Barbara Bush. And whenever we're looking at the actual history of Barbara Bush and the Bush family, and now how they're connected to the Clinton family, and even, Ted Cruz to some degree, we really have to understand how far back all of this corruption really goes, and how far back the idea of them being Satanists, or at least being the moon children of Satanists, you see. Before you actually have a bit of a crazy theory or a little bit of history, if you do a background search, or at least you do your little bit of a research. And it tells you the story, somewhat on this slide, at least, of how Aleister Crowley kind of came into being, or at least how he came into contact with who would essentially be Barbara Bush's father. You see. So I'm going to read to you guys a little bit of it, and then we're going to go to the next slide where it actually accents the actual story and the conception. So during Crowley's stay at Harris's household, he was working to complete a higher degree of evil by performing rituals which would make him eligible to receive a new grade in the occult order he helped found, the Ordo Templi Orientis. In order to achieve this new grade of ipsissimus, and I'm sure I probably pronounced that wrong, Crowley was to complete a very specific magical ritual that he referred to as the Supreme Ordeal. He was, with some assistance, supposed to exhaust himself sexually until he entered a state of waking sleep, at which time he would end the ceremonies with a marathon bout of coitus. It's expected that by many that Harris, O'Hare, and Pauline Pierce were his partners in this ceremony. So Pauline Pierce, just to kind of give you guys a bit of an understanding as to who she was, Pauline Pierce is, as it says here, a mother from the United States, a mother of two from the United States, and she was visiting Paris at the time. So to give you an idea what I'm explaining is the setup for what would really be called ritual sex magic. And Aleister Crowley, for those of you who do not know, wanted to style himself as one of the most wicked people in the world. He raveled in actually debauchery. He wanted to make himself Antichrist. He styled his name Crowley to rhyme with holy. And now this lady, Pauline Pierce, is having coitus with him and producing what? Barbara Bush. Barbara Crowley Bush. Okay, so to continue on with the story, Pauline Pierce returned to the United States in October of 1924, and 8 months later, in June of 1925, she gave birth to Barbara Pierce, who would later go on to marry a young politician and soon-to-be CIA director named George Herbert Walker Bush. Okay, so you see how we're talking about the actual establishing of what I would consider a satanic bloodline, or at least an occultic bloodline. Now, to understand where how this all ties into what's going on now, we really have to understand the roots of it and how it's spread out and how it's been able to masquerade itself. I have a clip from you guys, and I'm sure you've probably seen him before, but if you haven't, his name is Ted Gunderson. He's a former head of the FBI. He was doing it for, I think, about 17 years, and rest in peace, he's dead now. They killed him for what I'm about to show you, the kind of information that he's exposing. of how there's corruption within the federal institution, the FBI, the CIA, etc., how there is Satanism being practiced with human trafficking and all kinds of other things. So this is more evidence of the occult world that we're living in, and how Satanism is being perpetrated all around us. But take a look at this clip.
But these kids invariably will draw these pictures. As you can see from Linda's case, she has pictures at her booth that her children have drawn. Now this was I was going to go back and testify for Lou, and I was going to say that based upon my reviewing the pictures drawn by the children, they've been exposed to a satanic activity. This is the most telltale of all the pictures. I'm going to show you a series of them. This is a totem pole with a goat's head at the top. Children at the various highest level. I understand, again, I say I understand because I'm not sure, because there's so much secrecy involved in the satanic movement. 8, 10 layers of classes of people within themselves, like the dabblers on up to the very highest level. But from my sources and my informants, I've been told that the various highest level of Satanism, you will have the totem pole, which is usually 3 to 6 feet tall, made out of wood, with the goat head at the top. So I was going to testify that based on my experience, that these children were exposed to the highest level of Satanism mainly because of this drawing right here, the goat hole, the totem pole with the goat's head. The judge would not allow me on the witness stand. I flew all the way to Philadelphia from Los Angeles, wouldn't allow me to testify. These are some of the other drawings. This is a body on a slab, undoubtedly an altar where they sacrificing blood. The genitals, and let me mention this also, children who have never been sexually molested in a recent study, not a recent study, a study back about 7 or 8 years ago, children who have never been sexually molested do not draw the genitals. Children who have been sexually molested, a high percentage of them draw the genitals, and so children who have been ritualistically sexually molested, a higher percentage will draw the genitals. Little Matt Bear drew a picture of people, a fire, baby being thrown in the fire, human sacrifice, obviously. An altar, bone, liver, blood, kitty. And another ritual ceremony. Here's trees, people, fire. And another, people have no cloth on, he says. Table, knife, devil. Okay, that's the Lou Bear case. Now, I think we're going to we got just a few more minutes, and I want Linda to take the podium, talk about her case. But I'm going to run through these next slides real fast, Linda. 100,000 children disappear every year per Reader's Digest, July 1982. Next.
So this is what happens whenever we actually go back and we start doing more and more of our research and understanding the foundation of the Satanic Society that's being blasted upon us right now. I mean, nowadays, and this is what's even more crazy, nowadays you can see the actual evidence of them externalizing the hierarchy, of them uncloaking, so to speak, and yet still people try to deny their existence or try to deny their intention and their willpower towards other people. You see, these are people that understand exactly what they're doing. They live in a world of inversion, a world inside of ours, and that's why they're now bringing forth this satanic system to us. And Ted Gunderson, God rest his soul, was still talking about how most of this evidence comes from either children or people who have been traumatized, sexualized, or even brutalized to some degree because of how far back this goes. I have another short video I want you guys to take a look at because this is more information where it's validating the fact that there is a satanic underground network of people who are not only trafficking kids but are conducting these satanic rituals. It's called the Hampstead case, and fair warning beforehand, skip ahead about 2 minutes of this statement because what these children are talking about is is truth. It is literally fact on fact on fact. The rapid fire of them being able to recall this information with such clarity with children at this age, it's insane.
We decided to stop touching each children and stop touching each other and stop touching ourselves and face our urge.
And what else are you going to stop doing?
And stop touching ourselves. And we're going to stop touching ourselves.
And what else are you going to stop?
And stop killing babies. And stop killing babies, and we're going to face our fear and face our urge.
You're going to face your fear. Because fear is what?
Fear is the mind killer.
And you're going to help us to catch. Who are you going to help us to catch?
All the pedophiles. Papa, Mr. Hollins, the school.
All the policemen, all the social services.
Speak up, speak up.
All the shopkeepers, all the cafes, all the pizza expressos.
Who did you mention just now? Who, Caf what?
Kafkas.
Who's Kafkas?
You know, there's people who work at Kafkas.
What is Kafkas?
Kafkas is they're for children. They work with the social services.
And what did they do to you?
They do sex. They touch each other. They touch me and Gabriel. They have plastic willies. And they stick it in our bottom.
Who does? Who sticks it in your bottom?
Social services. Everybody does. All of them.
Who?
Everybody.
Does your mother do it?
No.
Do I do it?
No.
Who does it then?
Papa, Mrs. Hollins, the school.
Who?
Parents.
My dad's
Tell me more
family.
people. Tell me some more people, please. I'm interested.
Parents, police.
What about the teachers at school? Who's the main one?
Papa, Mr. Hollins, Mrs. Forsyth.
Who's Mrs. Forsyth?
She's the head teacher of our school.
And what does she do?
And she does sex. She got a big birthmark with a big tattoo on her pride.
And what happens in the church?
And we do baby sacrifice and eat the baby.
What do you mean sacrifice and eat the baby?
So we kill the baby and eat it and drink the blood from it.
Is that true, Gabriel?
Yes. And we dance with the skulls.
You what?
We dance with the skulls in the church.
What skulls?
Skulls of the baby.
Pardon?
Baby skulls. The skulls of the baby.
You dance with the baby skulls?
Yes.
And who kills the babies?
Papa, me, Elisa. And
Who kills the babies?
Papa.
And what, he gets you to help him?
Yes.
Shoot.
So he tells us to hold the hand with a knife, and then he holds his hand on our hand. So then he cuts the baby's head off. And then he puts it upside down, and then we drain the blood.
And then what they do?
And then we cook it, and then we drink the blood, and then after we go and dance with the skulls.
So I don't know if that frightened you guys a little bit, because it definitely sent shivers down my spine. The fact that we have two children that seem relatively normal to a degree walking around discussing the Satanic Society, the underground occult world that's going on, the reason for all these child sacrifices, the reasons for all of these children disappearing, the reason for all this crazy demonic activity, for the rise in demonic possession, whatever you would want to call it. I personally call it establishing the Satanic Kingdom. The fact that you have two children being able to list multiple people, putting names and faces to these people who are conducting these kinds of satanic and satanic pedophilistic behavior, and how it's just interwoven into society, shows you how well thought out this really is. Like the children said, there were people from McDonald's, there were nurses, there were teachers. And as Ted Gunderson says, even in his research, they had gone to a previously shut down school where the holes underneath certain classrooms had been filled in. As if they're snatching children or sexualizing children at school, this public indoctrination center. So this takes on a whole new meaning, really, whenever we start looking at everything that's going on. People think it's coincidence that the Temple of Baal is being erected. And at the same time, just last year, we had the Satanic Temple being mounted in Detroit and the Ten Commandments being taken down in Oklahoma. This is the Satanic Kingdom. This is the Great Inversion. This is the occult world that I'm trying to mention to you guys. Because I don't know I don't know how we can look at all the other evidence of everything else that's going on and deny this fact that we are actively engaged in a spiritual war, that a spiritual war is now manifesting itself here physically. The ability that these people have to erect a statue like Baphomet, and I'll get into Baphomet here in a second, the fact that they have the gusto, the bravado, and the courage to put up a statue is a declaration. It's a testament to where they're at. Before you, I have some statements. Religious freedom, right? That's the politically correct term for what this is. We're letting these Satanists practice their magic and their religion because it's free, right? And pagan worship of ancient deities. Could it be that all this is transpiring right now because 2016 is referred to as the year of light? And this is one of the more funny things that I feel like people don't understand. They think the 80s was a totally satanic time with Anton LaVey, Marilyn Manson, and all these other people that are saying, praise Satan, hail Satan, this, that, and the third, Helter Skelter, and all these other people. It's not a game, and that's what people really need to understand. When they're saying this, they're putting their intention, they're putting their willpower, and they're putting their spiritual essence towards something that is not beneficial to most people. It is beneficial to self. Whenever these people conduct these types of operations, and how this refers to the 80s, is because they built the foundation of the satanic society that we're seeing now. They dabbled back then to figure out what they could get away with. That's why it was called the Satanic Scare, the wave that came across America, because it literally felt like a wave of satanic energy was being carried across America. And this is what's happening now. Just a few months ago, we have Satanists declaring the dawn of a new age on the footsteps of Capitol. You see. So it's like, how much more evidence do we need that we are under attack at a spiritual level? Someone who has evidence of this spiritual attack is Russ Dizdar. If you've paid attention to any of my occult work regarding the demonic influence that's on the rise, then you've heard of him before. But I'm going to let him speak on some of the variety of attacks that we're being faced with.
Was done in New York by Aleister Crowley. Big rituals, the light show of Kali, the demon of destruction, has been painted on the buildings in New York. It's almost like waving a flag, crying out for the demon gods of hell to come and bring destruction, chaos, and even more deception. And that's going to involve deep decadence as prophesied in Scripture. At the end of the days, I've been saying this again and again and again, have I not? The three things that are going to be huge: the sexual decadence that will involve even sex with the demons, the drug, the pharmakia issue, and just simply direct worship of the demon gods and possession. Now, this is what God does in the book of Revelation, in which it seems that there's moments when things are suspended and God summons a call to repentance, which is a God-given kindness. The power of God to interrupt our destruction, turn us around, and move us to receive His grace and to grip heaven's offer of indestructible immortality in Christ.
So I've kind of come to the conclusion that if we all know that this is the work of the devil, then the only person that can kill the devil, or at least deal with the devil, is Christ or God. Okay, so that's where I'm at with my understanding, or at least my relationship with all this information. Okay, so if there's a devil, then there's a God. If there's a Satan, then there's a Lucifer, or there's a Jesus. Okay, that's where I'm at. So as far as understanding Baphomet and the symbology that he's been used throughout history with, and this is just my interpretation of it and how I see it being utilized in the modern realm, is that Baphomet is a symbolical alchemical symbol that represents what is now described as transhumanism. If you've seen the depiction of Baphomet with his two horns, one hand extended upwards with two fingers pointed, and then another two fingers pointed downwards, representing the sun and the moon, and with breasts as well as male genitalia, the fact is that we're seeing a humanoid goat chimera creature being propagated throughout the entire society. The idea and the symbology behind this is that they want an ambiguous, androgynous man-beast creature that is consistently changing. The fact that we're unsure of where we are, our orientation, the identities, the role identities, or the gender identities, how people are classifying it nowadays, they're being distorted, and it's through worship of Baphomet. And before you, I actually have depictions of Cesar Borgia displaying the Baphomet stance. And so what you have to understand, because this ties into Pope Francis and the Roman Catholic Church as well, what you have to understand is that these people are practicing Satanists. There's a reason why exorcisms have to be ordained by the Catholic Church, so that they can do inventory on their own demons. This is the Satanic kingdom. So when we're talking about the Catholic Church, Baphomet society, and the establishment of the Satanic kingdom, we have to bring all of these different facts into play. The fact that we have, in 2016, the reality of people changing their gender because, well, they can. Well, is that not Aleister Crowley's "Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," who I mentioned at the start of this video, where he wanted to be wicked? This is a man where we're still talking about things in the flesh. Do you see how we're still going down the rabbit hole of fleshly wickedness and what we're propagating? So, in my interpretation, as far as how Baphomet is being utilized now, this deity, is because they're using this satanic symbol as a marker, as a guideline for what they're trying to do, or at least a basis for where they're going to go. I mean, already and this is the only reason I can attribute it to transhumanism, is because of what's going on, not only in the physical realm, but in the spiritual realm as well. We're literally changing our psyche towards reality. And because of this change, because of this quote-unquote paradigm shift, it's now being manipulated. And I can't say this enough, that our natural growth in certain rights are manipulated. So let me tie this in, or at least come to a conclusion on this, on Baphomet and how he's being utilized by the church, so that people slowly start to worship more of the flesh, more of the world, instead of trying to find spiritual salvation. You see, and that's where we're at, because Baphomet, like Pan, the Greek god of music, the wild, and a shepherd to the flock, this is a deity which is tied to the earth, to Gaia. So whenever we're talking about ancient deities being resurrected so that they can be praised these days, well, that's exactly what's happening with the Temple of Baal and Baphomet. When these people are establishing their statues and their temples, they're essentially erecting a statement saying that we have enough people to congregate around this idea, and we believe that we'll display this publicly, and that's what's happening. So whenever we see this ideology of loving life, quote unquote, loving love, quote unquote, where we think love is simply sex, instead of actually understanding someone, coming to a one mind body between the two of you, and actually being able to understand someone at an empathic and spiritual level, we just think love is sex. And that's the ingenious of all this, is because they're riding on the common sense factor, clearly, but because everything is so dumbed down, they're using this critical time to usurp us. And that's why they're trying to, like Lucifer, be the great imitator. I'm going to use this as a point to segue into Pope Francis, the Franken Pope, and how he's using this love of life theology to promote the one world religion. And we see this now coming out on the heels of post-industrialization. With Pope Francis, Franken Pope, we see him coming out in full advocacy of Agenda 2030, the carbon cleanup, where we're essentially reforming what we think of as society. This is why we see the Pope coming out calling for, quote unquote, decarbonization. Now, if you've looked at any of my other work, then you understand why that's a big factor, because what he's essentially calling for is depopulation. And in the words of Bill Gates, with his COPSEC formula, where I keep referring back to it, where people are a factor in this equation, what they're doing is they're essentially trying to create a legal and ethical framework to start killing people off. Now, with the society that we have, this is sacrifice. This is sacrifice. But we have temples of Baal being erected, the Ten Commandments being torn down, statues of Baphomet being brought up in Detroit, Satanism being allowed to be a legitimate religion on your army application, and pedophilia is now being classified as a new sexual orientation because of the LGBT movement. So whenever we have the Pope coming out, who's not speaking any kind of doctrine because he's speaking on the world, he's speaking on the one world religion, which is earth, paying attention to the earth instead of the soul, the spirit. When he's calling for decarbonization and looking at these types of things, what he's really trying to do is change the entire mindset of people. He's allowing his religious status to be reworked in a political fashion. This is why we hear the separation of religion and state, of church and state, is so essential. But at the same time, when do we see it happening? Because America is a Christian nation, a Judeo-Christian nation. This is how we were established, blah, 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 blah. I'm not trying to go down that point. The point I'm trying to make, to get back to point with this, the one world religion, modern paganism, is because, as I was saying before, with Pan, the Greek god of music, the wild, and a shepherd to the flock, these are all worldly things. So while we're all paying attention to what's going on here, with the Pope, we're not really understanding what's happening in the spiritual realm, so to speak. And I don't want to preach to you guys, but what I'm trying to say is we're so engaged in this physical world that we literally do not take the time to understand things in a spiritual fashion. The reason why I've come out to do this and do these videos, the podcast, and everything that I do is because of this calling that I do have. Now, the same way I have a calling to try to help people, to try to talk to people, to try to understand this, and to try to be good, is the same way that you genuinely have people that wish ill will towards others. And they try to maximize on this the same way I have tried to maximize on my own efforts of trying to spread the good word. So whenever you have a network of satanic people, including the Pope, because we understand that the Vatican is riddled with pedophiles and riddled with satanic involvement, we have to understand what's actually happening. This is them trying to establish the satanic kingdom, this network, while simultaneously promoting what seems like a common sense idea. This is the one world religion. This is the occult world that we're being meandered into. And the reason why I did this video is because literally the evidence is mounting up against it. It would be disrespectful and mentally midgeting, or making myself a mental midget, to not get this kind of stuff out there to you guys. Okay. So in closing, I'm going to go over one more thing that I think is important that we really should pay attention to, which is one of the reasons why this kind of spurred off this video. Another video that I will do in the future is where we look at numerology, astronomy, astrology, and all these other occult sciences that these people use to kind of conduct these global rituals, these worldwide satanic rituals. And it's very strange because whenever you actually start looking at all these things, you start to see a very strange trend pick up. And one of the strange trends that I did see was that April historically has been a very, very active month, so to speak. I put some of these dates here to show you guys what would happen or what has happened in the past in regards to May Day, which is next month, and then April as well. I didn't necessarily go over Beltane and what that is because that's also an occultic holiday that's involved in all this. But what I want you guys to focus on right here are some of these dates, like the Waco Massacre, the Oklahoma City bombing. I'm sure you're all very well aware of what Columbine is, the Virginia Tech Massacre, and even the Boston bombings, and how a few days later, that one of the Tsarnaev brothers was killed after the Boston bombings. But one of the things we should pay attention to is the time frame, the window, the 16th through the 19th. Okay, so I know what everybody here is thinking. 420, bro. Yeah. Well, I caught that memo too. It's also Hitler's birthday. Did you catch that? It's also Hitler's birthday. At least 10 people have been killed almost every other year on Hitler's birthday in 420, and it's also been a massacre. These are sacrifices, false flags, whatever you would want to call them. These are sacrifices. This society that you see is built off of sacrificing, of deity worship. And once you really do start to realize that you're in a satanic slave system, you start to wake up. You realize that none of this is by coincidence. None of this is by coincidence. This is all orchestrated chaos. I'm putting this here for you guys so you can pay attention, so we can have a marker that if anything does happen within this time frame of April 16th to April 19th of 2016, we have a marker to show the history of what has happened in this time frame throughout history involving this satanic society. You see. So I want to thank you guys for paying attention to this edition of the Occult World. I hope I didn't kind of blow your mind, or at least think, hey, why is Freedom talking about some more crazy stuff? I don't understand this. Well, my idea behind it is with it, or at least understanding all this type of information, it helps guide us or at least get us on the path to where we need to start going, to start making the right kind of calls, personally, spiritually, independently, whatever you want to call them, to start trying to make ourselves a better person and getting engaged in this war. I do this all out of my own heart because this is supposed to just wake people up, to bring awareness to the situation. It comes to a point to where you can't deny it, and that's where I'm at. But that's all I really got for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll have it in the description bar below. And as always, guys, expose lies and share truth. This is Noise Era, Freedom Faction, out.